When my grandfather learned there was question of my sex, it was suggested by him that they just let me die.
I look female on the outside. I have a normal female body, basically, but instead of having XX chromosomes like a typical female, I have XY chromosomes like a typical male.
The truth is, the distinction between male and female isn't that clear-cut.
When I was born, I showed up and I had ambiguous genitals. My mom, who was a nurse, who worked at the hospital where I was born, looked around and she saw all the nurses around the edge of the birthing suite do this.
And everyone's dying to know what the baby is, and how do you say, we don't really know yet. I actually had one parent tell me that she almost wished her child had cancer because at least people have heard of that.
What I've learned is that people don't fall in love with genitals. They fall in love with your soul.
So what does it really mean to be male or female?
I wanted another boy.
I wanted a girl. Well, I thought it was going to be a girl.
I'd have liked a girl, but as long as he's healthy, I ain't bothered.
The sex of a baby is more often than not the first question everyone asks.
The husband said, "Oh my goodness, it's a little boy," and both very emotional. It was lovely, really lovely moment.
But for some parents, it's not that straightforward.
Working as a clinical psychologist and as a certified sex therapist, I worked for a long time with people who were born with ambiguous genitalia, people who we call intersexed. And those people are usually raised with a lot of shame and secrecy. Those babies are hidden from general society. I really understand that experience because that's the way that I was born, and that was my experience of growing up.
Giving birth to a baby whose sex isn't obvious can be frightening and confusing. And many parents would want to protect the identity of their child by remaining anonymous.
They took us in a room and they said, "We need to check the sex of your child." And I thought, oh my God, looking at him and looking at the way he was made, you could actually look at him and in a different light think that he looked like a little girl.
For most people, it's the first time they will have ever heard of something like this.
And I was scared. I was scared for him, and I was scared for us, and I was scared about the effect it was going to have on us as a family. But I knew that I owed it to my son to sort it out. We were going to move. We were going to go to America or Australia just to get away.
Many new moms would feel the same shock and fear, because sexual ambiguity just doesn't seem to fit with our view of the world.
Some little girls who are born actually have male genes and are producing male hormones, but they look like little girls, and some babies who are born look like little boys, but in reality they have female genes and female internal structures.
We've been fed by a tale of two sexes, I think, from generation to generation, so that we think about maleness and femaleness as total separate packages that don't meet in the middle, when there is, in fact, huge overlap.
My childhood was chaotic. There were three of us all around the same age. There was a lot of noise and a lot of silliness. I used to sneak in and put on my mom's makeup when she was out and loved dressing up in her clothes.
And the famous
Gosh. Wow, that's a lot of makeup. I look
Halloween.
really happy. A lot of pink.
Growing up, I knew there was something different about me, but I never expected to hear what my parents told me that day. I never expected that there was this secret about me that would just kind of come out of nowhere. It was definitely shocking. I was not prepared to think about myself as totally and irreversibly different than every other woman. I look female on the outside. I have normal female body, basically, but I am a woman who has XY chromosomes, which are typical for males. It took me a while to really wrap my mind around the biology. I don't think I understood biologically how women could have male chromosomes. I understood the words they were using. I didn't really understand what they meant.
In normal fetal development, things actually start off pretty much the same. If there's a Y chromosome, then the gonad will develop into a testis. The testis produces a number of hormones, the most important of which is testosterone. And it's testosterone that will cause the external genital structures to develop. The testis will produce anti-Müllerian hormone, and that stops the female structures from developing. So a male fetus won't have a womb.
That all stems from the Y chromosome. In the absence of a Y chromosome, the fetus develops ovaries, which do not produce the same level of testosterone as testes. And it's basically due to these lower levels of testosterone that a baby develops a female body.
Now, there are some conditions where things don't work normally. So, for example, in androgen insensitivity syndrome, a child does have a Y chromosome, so an X and a Y chromosome, with testes that are producing male hormones, but the body just doesn't respond in the normal way to those hormones. And so the baby, when born, looks like a normal little girl.
Androgen insensitivity syndrome is what Katie has.
In my case, my body didn't respond to androgens at all. The Y chromosome also made a hormone that told my body not to develop the uterus and fallopian tubes and ovaries. So what I had inside me were internal testes, and I looked female on the outside. I look female on the outside.
Katie's condition, complete androgen insensitivity, is rare. About 1 in 20,000 of us are born with it. But it's only one of many conditions called disorders of sexual development, otherwise known as DSDs.
DSD is a broad range, looking at a spectrum from girls who may appear much more masculine initially to boys who are under-masculinized. And so it is really anywhere along that spectrum from femaleness to maleness.
In all, there are about 24 conditions producing differences in sexual development, blurring the distinction between male and female. Many are relatively rare, but some, especially the milder differences, are surprisingly common.
Undescended testes are very common. That happens in about 3% of the population at birth, and some of the testes may come down in the first couple of months of life, but we generally say throughout life, if you were to look at any age, it's about 1%. And that's a significant number.
Altogether, DSDs occur as frequently as twins or red hair. It's estimated that in a city like London or New York, around 100,000 people may have a DSD of some sort. People like Katie.
Slow your roll there, Mom. They're good when they really puff up.
I had a premonition that she would be a little girl about a month or so before she was born, and so I was pleased that my idea of her was the reality. It's lovely having a boy or a girl, but it was a lot of fun having a little girl.
It tastes really good, though, don't they?
I like the taste of that.
So, when she was 6, she slipped in the tub one day and started crying, and we noticed that she had a bulge in her groin, which was a hernia.
I remember the hernia. I remember that it hurt. There's a lump in my groin. I remember going in for the surgery. I remember lying on the operating room table and being really embarrassed because I was naked in front of all of these strangers.
What the surgeons discovered causing the hernia was a partially descended testicle.
I don't even remember what was going through my mind, just that why had this horrible thing happened to me. And we had just finished our medical training, 10 years of medical school and then 6 years of residency. You think, wow, I've been through this whole hard part of my life and now things are going to settle down. I'm going to raise a family and have a nice job. And then all of a sudden, you feel like your family is just burdened by this terrible condition, and how are you going to cope with this?
You're flabbergasted. And as a physician, everything that we knew about this condition was very abnormal. And so you just say, oh my God, my child is in this abnormal section of the medical textbooks that took up a quarter of one page.
What we had been taught in medical school was that women who had a condition like androgen insensitivity really weren't women, they were genetically male. And what we were taught was that these women were never to be told of their diagnosis of their chromosomes or that they had had testes, because it would be so devastating to them that they would commit suicide.
Me?
What parent is going to convey a piece of information that might lead their kid to hurt themselves? It was a very, very difficult time, a lot of sadness associated with it. But on the flip side, you've got this bubbling 6-year-old girl who's happy and she's talented and lights up a room when she comes in the room. So at the time, it just felt like the best thing to do was just keep it to yourself and see how things played out.
6-year-old Katie recovered well from the operation, but her parents weren't happy keeping silent.
What was most important was that she be prepared for the kind of life that she was going to have. I think I told her that most women have a nest inside their bodies where a baby can grow, and that some girls do not have that nest and that they will be having their families by adoption. And when you say something like that, when you're bringing up an alternative to a child, many times they'll ask, well, do I have a nest in my body? And at that point, I said, no, you do not. But you will be a mommy and have a very lovely family, and it'll be very exciting because you'll be adopting your children.
It really kind of changed my world. And I remember even as like a 9-year-old feeling sad when I saw pregnant women or even little babies made me feel sad for a long time.
Katie's parents waited until they felt she was old enough to understand before telling her the full genetic facts of her condition.
I was very, very angry at my parents. I was incredibly angry because they had known about this for 12 years. And my doctors all knew about it, and my grandparents knew about it, and a couple of other people in my family had known about it. And like strangers, like doctors who just happened to be in the office when I was there, knew more about me than I did. You know, I wondered if I would ever look female, if I would ever look normal. I mean, my body looked female. It just looked, I didn't look like a woman. I looked like a little girl. And so I wondered if I would ever look like a woman. And I wondered if I would ever be loved, if I was so different that I couldn't be loved.
All disorders of sexual development present challenges. Some DSDs can even be life-threatening.
Did I worry about dying? Wow. I don't know. I think I worried about my differences. I don't really think that as a child you think about death. You think about being sick or needing to be in the hospital. But I didn't know how close maybe I was sometimes.
Janet has CAH, or congenital adrenal hyperplasia. That means her adrenal glands don't work properly and she can't make enough crucial hormones.
It's very threatening to a body, particularly if there are infections or some sort of other trauma that happens. You count on your body to react with extra cortisol, and people with adrenal hyperplasia, that's not the way the bodies work. Rather than fighting infections, it ends up collapsing from it. So it can be very dangerous, especially for young children and infants.
One side effect of CAH is that the body makes too much testosterone, and that can lead to somewhat male-looking genitals.
Well, the physical impact is that I was born of ambiguous gender determination, which whether it was back in the 1950s or now, they just couldn't determine the gender of my parents' baby in the ways that it's normally. It's just such an easy declaration, boy or girl, but it's sometimes not that simple.
Male and female genitals actually grow from the same tissue. It's just testosterone that makes them look different.
The initial structure the baby has can grow a little bit and become a clitoris, or it can be stimulated by testosterone and grow a lot and become a penis. What it does to a female fetus with CAH is that those high levels of testosterone hormones will mean that she'll start to develop some of the external changes of a male.
Janet was born with female chromosomes, a womb, and ovaries. But because of her CAH, her genitals look somewhere between female and male.
I know that there was concern about what kind of life I would have because of the way that my body was. When my grandfather heard that I was a girl that didn't look very much like a girl, and that I was sick, that he suggested to my father that maybe it would be better if I didn't live. That if I couldn't grow up and marry and possibly have children, then really what kind of life could I have?
I see a lot of parents go through a tremendous amount of fear and guilt that they're somehow at fault for having given birth to a child that has a birth difference. I think my parents were worried about that too. There's also a lot of shame and stigma that goes along with having a kid that's born different. And how do you explain that to people? And how do you tell people how it is that this happened?
I actually had one parent tell me that she almost wished her child had cancer because at least people have heard of that. So when she needed support, she could say, this is what my child has, and people would know what it meant. To say, my child has mixed gonadal dysgenesis doesn't mean anything to them, and trying to explain the ramifications for her child, she just found scary and overwhelming. I think it can be very confusing and isolating for families. And the thing that always worries me the most is that early feeling of shame starts to develop, that this is something I can't talk about. It has to do with genitalia, and we don't talk about that. So I can't tell my sister, I can't tell my friends at work, and everyone's dying to know what the baby is, and how do you say, we don't really know yet.
People tend to kind of create radio silence, and they kind of wait for the doctors to come up with some kind of decision about this. And the doctors are looking at their chromosomes and their gonads and how the tissues respond to various kinds of hormonal influences, and seeing what's going to happen if they try to give this kid a male assignment or try to give this kid a female assignment. And that can be a messy process.
Doctors need to unravel what happened during the baby's development. Among other things, they check the body's DNA containers, the chromosomes, to see whether the child is genetically female or male. They see if the baby has ovaries or testes, and whether they have a womb or not. They also test what hormones the body is producing and examine the genitals in detail.
It's really our investigation, almost as detectives, really, an investigation into it and trying to find out what the external structures are and what the internal structures are.
The results aren't always straightforward.
You may end up with testicles with XY chromosomes, but you have a normal female external appearance, and you've got a brain that identifies yourself as female. You may end up with ovaries and XY chromosomes, and you're identifying those as male.
What's more, none of the test is either or. Each one can be somewhere in between male and female.
We can end up with all kinds of differences when those things don't all balance out correctly, but generally they balance out in a normal way, a predictable way, and what you get are typically females that develop and they turn out little girls, and males that develop as little males, and that's what we typically see. When we look at the rest of this variance, it's because there's a difference. Determining what all those differences are is what differences in sexual development is all about.
What's amazed me the most is that there is such a continuum from the male to the female, and it's really hard to draw a line somewhere neatly in the middle.
Nevertheless, a sex has to be written on the birth certificate. So the doctors have no choice but to assign male or female, whichever they and the family decide is most appropriate. The next question is whether to do surgery to make their child look more typical for its gender. In the past, surgery was standard practice, accepted almost without question.
Parents really didn't get what was being done. But they agreed because there was a doctor that said, this is the best thing we can do for your child. Really, my first memory is of being in a hospital. Very clear memory. I was about 2, and I can remember exactly where the bed was in the room. I can remember that it was kind of a crib because it had the bars on it. I remember where the door was to the bed and how the door had that the glass that's kind of milky. And when you used to have exams or the nurses came in, your parents were made to leave the room. I could see that my parents were very upset. I just knew that it was about being brave. So I started saying, if you hear someone cry, it's not me. And I said that to them every time they had to leave the room. Nobody was looking in my eyes. There was not one resident, not one anyone who said to me, you know, are you okay? Or actually looked at me other than to lift up the sheets. And I remember thinking, well, if I can do what they're doing, if I can remove my mind from where my body is, this will be over. I got good at it. It actually took me months to go to my mom to try and get clarification. Why am I different than other little girls? And it was very sad for her. You know, I just remember her getting really emotional about it. And I think I was looking for confirmation from her that everything was okay and that I wasn't all that different. And I remember, you know, kind of this hoping for, I love you just the way you are and everybody is different and it'll be okay. And what I ended up with was with another surgery pretty quickly.
It was the 3rd time she'd had surgery.
A lot of the people that come to see me remember being little kids in the hospital. They remember a tremendous amount of pain around their genitals. They remember getting no explanation about what was happening to them, and they know that they still have trouble with their genitalia.
My parents, and the parents for decades, they really didn't understand. They were told things like, well, you know, your child wasn't completely formed in the womb, and we'll take care of that. or this is just a little nothing, it'll all be okay. And what parent wants to be thinking about their children's genitals? You know, they don't. So, you know, in medicine, our doctors used to say, this is what you need to do, and we used to say yes.
My mom wanted a girl. She had my older brother first. And like most 50s families, they thought it would be great to have a boy and a girl, and that's not what happened. I had this very mixed presentation where things looked very between male and female. Not really very male or very female at all, but very much in between. I had kind of floppy sacs that could have been testicular sacs, or they could have been labia majora. And I had a penile structure that was bent down that could have been labia minora or the shaft of the penis. And I had kind of what would have been the head of the penis or the clitoris that was kind of split and put in the wrong place for really either one. And then there was kind of a pouch in between these two sacs that was pretty shallow. They called it a vaginal pit.
Tiger had a severe form of a common condition called hypospadias. At the time, the standard medical procedure was to use surgery.
I've had 20 surgeries, and first surgery is done at 3 months. I'm a 3-month-old baby, and they're already doing corrective surgery on my genitals. From my point of view, all the surgeries that I suffered previous to age 19 were unnecessary failures, and I lost a tremendous amount of feeling tissue that I would like to have still, and that was taken from me. I was enduring a lot of pain and a lot of really invasive procedures and nasty stuff happening in the office, and my mom had to be there for all that. It was very, very hard on her, and I felt terrible about that. Even as a little kid, I felt like, how can I make this easier on her? I think that the weight that she bore was far worse than it should have been, and it's one of the reasons I do the work that I do. I try to reach out to people who are as isolated as she was and get them the information necessary.
On the show today is Dr. Tiger Devore. He's a sex therapist, a psychologist.
Most people think that human beings just come in two kinds, man or women. But the truth is that it's a whole lot more complex than that. There's chromosomes. I remember being in the hospital and my dad coming in at visiting hours, and he said, he told me that my mom was really, really sad, really in a shaky place. And he said, whatever you can do to make it seem like you're okay and you're not hurting, do the best you can to pretend that you're okay today. And it's hard to be, 7, 8, 9 years old and try to hold all that completely to yourself, because the doctor won't talk to you about it, the nurse won't talk to you about it. And when my dad comes in and says, we don't want you to talk to us about it either, at least just not today, that's pretty hard to do.
In the past decade, treatment for disorders of sexual development has been undergoing something of a revolution.
It's far less paternalistic than it used to be, and our team as a whole really believes that the whole family needs to be involved from the very beginning. Parents are involved in the very first discussions we have, and we encourage them to continue that conversation over time.
The goal of our DSD team is to really take a multi-specialty approach and heavily involving the family with that. And so we have urology, endocrinology, psychology, genetics, social work. I think all of that is very important to really treating a child with a complex disorder that requires the expertise of all of those components. I don't think that one team member can adequately take care of the child.
Regarding infant surgery, there is heated debate on both sides of the argument.
There are a lot of activists who describe infant surgery in one word, and they refer to it as mutilation.
There are many reasons why one might consider doing surgery on a young child.
What parents worry about is bringing up a child as a girl when their genitalia look male, and they worry about bullying and teasing and swimming and all those sorts of things. And they're very real worries.
We know from studies now that with fetal surgery, the fetus heals very quickly and does very well, and infants respond to surgery and heal better than they do in later childhood and certainly adolescence.
Sending your child for surgery is hard for any parent.
They said in order for him to function as a man, he was going to need intensive surgery, about 3 to 5 surgeries, because the way he was at the moment, that was never going to happen. The surgeon told me it was going to look horrific. He said it was going to look like it had been chewed, and that's exactly what it looked like. It looked like a dog had got hold of him. And at that stage I thought that there's no sexual future for my son. It's impossible. He won't even be able to wee from that, let alone anything else. And I just thought, yeah, we've been told he's a man, but God, he's not going to be able to function as a man. And I was absolutely devastated. The surgeon said, let's go back in that room and let's look at it properly. He said, try and look at it differently. And I did. And he was right. And actually we're lucky. He used to have surgery, and then we'd come out of the recovery room and we'd go through the children's cancer ward, and that was a stark reminder every time I came through that ward and saw those poor little children, that actually we're lucky.
Unless there's a medical necessity to change the appearance of those genitals, I don't think they should be cut on at all. I think they should be prevented from being cut on. It's the kid's genitals. It's not the parents' genitals. It's not the doctor's genitals. It's the kid's genitals. And when they're a young adult, they're going to want their genitals to work.
You don't know how a body is going to grow. You know, when children are born, they can have excess hormones from their mothers, so their genitals can be enlarged or engorged anyway. So to wait to see how that child grows, what looks to be a large clitoris on a 5-pound child can look totally different when that child is a year or 2.
When I got into my early teens and I got a break from surgeries for a while, I started to feel a lot better about me, and I was less stigmatized because I wasn't going to school with tubes in me anymore. So I kind of went through these periods where, depending on how I was behaving and what was happening to me medically and psychologically, I was either able to have relationships with other people or not.
I think it's difficult when you have a body that you know is different, that in that moment of early discovery with someone, that instead of having that kind of heady wonderfulness of anticipation, what you feel is fear. I mean, you also feel anticipation, but you have fear, and you just wonder when you get to that moment of nakedness, is there going to be reaction? Is there going to be fear? Will somebody go running from the room? And what I've learned is that people don't fall in love with genitals. They fall in love with your soul.
Some disorders of sexual development, like Janet's congenital adrenal hyperplasia, will not prevent her from getting pregnant.
Come here, Marley.
It was wonderful for me to have my children. It meant I wasn't just in solitude, just thinking and trying to figure it out. There was every day we needed to get up and have breakfast and get to school and just do the things in a daily life that are diversions.
Just try to land on your face and not mine. All right, we're done.
I never understood really how great it was going to be and how much, really, no, how much fun it would be. The thing about having kids is that you can love them every day, even if you don't like some of what they're doing. But it really is all about, you know, that love and just knowing it's there. The most important thing I could do about feeling good about myself was being able to be a really good mom. And it just helped me get through the process and the understanding. And I just always felt blessed to have the kids. You are fabulous, and I do love you so much. You really did save my life.
It's funny, as much as she's been watching me grow, I've been watching her grow out of this woman that felt like she needed to be perceived as this amazing mom to actually just being an amazing mom and not caring who thought so or who knew. And because she is an amazing mom and she's this amazing woman.
I think I just got to a point in my life where I realized that there wasn't anything I had done that was my fault, or there wasn't anything that that I could claim as, you know, having to be shameful of. I think got to a point in my life where I was okay with me, and so that whatever I found out about what had happened wasn't going to kind of blow up my life.
She's a marvelous daughter. She's a wonderful person. She's a great mother. She learned how to cook from me, so she's a great cook.
Yep.
And she has a wonderful life, and she's done great things with her life, and will continue to.
The green household, because that dog.
Meanwhile, Katie's family was also finding ways to deal with her condition. The crucial decision was whether Katie should keep her testes.
We had been advised to leave them in her abdomen so that they could do the job of producing hormones that would take her through her own natural puberty, part of which is putting calcium in the bones to strengthen them. That's a very important thing that happens when a young person goes through puberty. And then after that, because there is a slight chance that they could become cancerous if left in indefinitely, that they be removed at that point.
I had them out a little less than a year after I found out about all of this. It was a pretty traumatic experience for me. I think, you know, we all made the decision together that I would have the surgery, but I didn't want to. You know, no one wants to have surgery that's not going to make you feel better. My parents were worried that there would be a risk of cancer, and I think that there may have been some sort of precancerous cells. But, you know, now we know that in cases like mine, the risk of cancer is like 1 in 13, which is actually less than the risk of a woman developing breast cancer in her life. And we don't, you know, take off women's breasts just in case.
It's called like crystal skull vodka or something.
You can replace hormones certainly with pills or patches or creams, but it's not the same as having the hormones that your body naturally produces, which any woman who's gone through menopause will tell you. And then you have to take pills every day for the rest of your life, and you have to mess around with the dose until you find something that works. And so there are a lot of benefits to keeping them in, and you know, I don't think we have enough data about what the risks are of leaving them in.
It's a decision facing all women with complete androgen insensitivity.
Increasingly, women with complete AIS are wanting to keep their testes. So testes, the presence of testes is now compatible with womanhood, with femininity. 15 years ago, when I came into this field, that was inconceivable. I think the fact that women feel that having testes is actually compatible with their femininity is really, really exciting.
As well as dealing with her own reactions to the condition, Katie still had to confront other people's reactions.
For a long time, when I started to date someone, AIS was like this, sort of like the elephant in the room, this secret that I was really, really afraid of telling someone because I was afraid it would be like a deal breaker and that the person wouldn't want to be with me anymore because of that. When I told my first boyfriend, and I said, you know, I was afraid to tell you because I feel so different. And he said, well, you are different and you're amazing, and that's why I want to be with you. His response made me feel safe and made me feel like I could start to accept myself. I don't feel nearly as lonely as I used to, and I know that I can tell people and they'll still love me.
I'm constantly humbled by patients' capacities to find their own solutions. No one, no matter what kind of history that they've had in terms of the care in relation to their DSD diagnosis, should give up. Patients shouldn't give up, and families shouldn't give up, and we never give up on any of our patients, no matter what history they come with.
I have to tell you, for most of my life, I was a mess. I really was. I mean, I lived my life, and I lived a great life, but psychologically, I just was stuck, and I would struggle, and I was scared. But I really have had a magnificent 14, 13 years or so. Really, since I got my medical record, since I realized I wasn't the only person like this, it's become a fabulous life. Because I'm not a person with a DSD, except when I'm doing this work. I'm a realtor, I'm a mom, I'm a normal person.
When I look in the mirror, I see someone who has come through something challenging and has made a lot of good out of that challenge. I also see someone who likes to read and to sing and to dance and to spend time with my friends. I see a daughter and a sister and a partner. I see someone who will be a mother and a grandmother. I see all of those things before I see someone with a DSD.